mental thinking. Would that not be one of the policies that could be used when the children of the Nephilim are aware that the end days are coming? How do you keep people in control? How do you feed the microbes? How do you make sure that nobody knows what's really going on? And how do you bleed off yet more energy for your own purposes? And we talked about outcome number 2. What would happen if the children of the Nephilim understand that even with all the technology rebuilt and great successes in that area, it is simply impossible to break through the Stargate, and that they're interned here into the bottomless pit. And then they come out into the open, start ruling the human race out in the open with unmitigated tyranny, using these kinds of weaponry now to just dominate and control and incarcerate and murder. Changes within the mental reactions of humans, whether induced artificially or not, may precipitate the so-called earth changes, and specifically the photonic reaction. So in my book I'm discussing this idea from the mental side, that perhaps it's not the case of the planet Earth going through photonic energy bands and then something just happening to us. Perhaps it's something within our own consciousness, within the collective unconscious, that is going to precipitate changes within what we think is external phenomena. The resulting anarchy, nihilism and debauchery, the loss of moral prohibitions, as well as certainty and normalcy, will trigger mass insanity on a global level. The return of the repressed content will mean loss of neocortical intelligence and prefrontal censoring. As the higher centers of psyche suffer trauma and overload, we will see man regressing to a limbic form of consciousness. Now, we see chaos of unimaginable proportions just for almost the slightest thing. There's an old saying that people are 3 meals away from revolution. It doesn't take much to trigger incredible scenes of rioting and chaos and frenetic behavior and debauchery. History is full of it. But what would happen if there's a full-on onslaught, not just of entrainment and radiotronic invasion into our psyche, but also, say, there is a natural cleansing cycle that's approaching us. The Mayas are convinced of it. The ancient prophets are convinced of these times. And it all boils down to the fact that we haven't done our inner spiritual cleansing and our inner spiritual homework. Barbara Hand-Clow says, "You all have miasmas in your bodies that you must release. These are etheric masses that hold memory of genetic past life disease patterns. These miasmas are being intensively activated by the photon band since March 14th, 1994. And the prophets had much to say on this very subject of the decline and fall. Pastor Bartholomeus in 1638 said, "A great change will come to pass, such as no mortal man will have expected. Heaven and hell will confront each other in this struggle. Old states will perish, and light and darkness will be pitted against each other with swords. But it will be swords of a different fashion. With these swords it will be possible to cut up the skies and to split the earth. A great lament will come over all mankind, and only a small batch will survive the tempest, the pestilence, and the horror." Different swords, different weaponry. Is that what the prophets are warning us against? And in many movies it's almost a perennial feature. Not only Blade Runner, but Mad Max, but Lord of the Rings, and even The Children of the Damned, and many other movies, Underworld, are all featuring Judge Dredd, featuring the end of times and the nihilism in the streets and a police state. If we watch movies like Free Jack, Hollywood is always mulling over this concept of the end times, the debauchery and nihilism that has been spoken of even by philosophers such as Nietzsche and so on. Now, there are also corresponding cycles of importance to take into consideration. Stephen Hanauer mentioned some of these. He says that Nick Fiorenza has determined that the Earth and the Sun will be aligning with the center of the galaxy sometime between 1999 and 2000. The equatorial plane of the Earth, known as the ecliptic, aligns with the ecliptic of the Sun at the same time that they both align with the ecliptic of the galactic core. This unique alignment occurs only 4 times during the precession of the equinox cycle, corresponding with the 4 corners of the world. The last configuration, similar to this upcoming alignment, corresponds to around 9,500 BC. He believes that there will be another major Earth changes as the time of the sinking of Atlantis and the Great Flood, but with one addition, that being a possible dimension shift. We also hear about the astrological transition from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. The signs of the zodiac come about because of the crossing of what they call the ecliptic and the celestial equator. And at these cross points we have the vernal equinoxes, the autumnal equinox, the summer solstice and the winter solstice. And in between those we have the 12 signs of the zodiac. And the sun, of course, passes backwards through these signs of the zodiac. It takes 2,160 years to pass through one sign of the zodiac. And it takes 25,920 to go through the entire 12 signs of the zodiac backwards. This backwards movement is called the precession of the equinox. The sun moves backwards, but it appears that the zodiac moves from the west to the east. Now presently, the sun is in the last degrees of the sign of Pisces, moving close to the sign we know as Aquarius. And if it was to move into the sign of Aquarius, after 30 degrees of each sign, then we would be in what is called or referred to as the age of Aquarius. And the Bible, albeit in cryptic language, speaks about these ages or these houses. For instance, in John 14 we read, "In my Father's house are many mansions, and I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also." Well, how can there be many mansions in a house? This is again a euphemism for the houses of the zodiac, and the 12 apostles of Jesus Christ are also considered that. Now, competent astrologers know that the negative traits associated with the sign of Pisces, this is the age that we've been in for over 2,000 years, concern deception, vice, hidden agendas, mass delusion, and the misuse of spiritual virtue and power. These are the negative traits we associate with the sign of Pisces. Every sign of the zodiac, just like every symbol and sign, has both positive and negative connotations. And these are the negative ones of Pisces. So in the age of Pisces, it was to be expected that the world would experience its share of these negatives on a macrocosmic level. As the age of Pisces comes to a close, the deceivers know that a paradigm shift which will occur does not favor their machinations. This understanding has led them to make many subtle alterations to their age-old stratagems. The study and tracking of these expedient accommodations, prompted by astromantic and cosmological phase shifts, amounts to an entire subject in itself. But what we can understand is that the ancients understood that the sun moves through the 12 signs of the zodiac very gradually backwards in the precession of the equinox, and that each time it moves into a different house, a new mythology is needed, a new set of symbols. In the age of Pisces, the mythographers, the powers that be, understand that we're coming to a cusp point and there's going to be a sizable shift. I mean, after all, in astrology, Pisces is a mutable water sign. Aquarius is a fixed air sign. There's going to be changes, quantum shifts in consciousness. And the powers that be, who know how to track these enormous epochal changes, understand that there's going to be a need to revise some of their own mythologies, and operating manuals, operating procedures will have to change. And the age of Aquarius is said to begin, nobody knows quite for sure, but they think it's to begin in AD 2740. However, as the sun moves towards the final degrees of the previous sign, the descendants of the great cults of power who are at the helm of the religions and governments need to make arrangements for that change. As each age terminates, the appointed mythographers have to get ready to script new mythologies consistent with the complex symbolism of the coming age. Their work is analogous to the Madison Avenue ad man, only their hot product is literally the New World Order. The end of an age is always distinguished by orchestrated chaos and conflagration. This is the true meaning of Armageddon. And it was known not just of this age of 2,000 years, but of all the ages, that when you come to the cusp point or approach it, there will be trials and tribulations attending the transition. So is this what we're heading towards? The cusp point of one zodiacal age into another? At the beginning, we promised to get to solutions, pointing out that the 21st century is a time for solution think, as opposed to the previous millennia and the previous ages, which have definitely been more about the problem think. If we have any of these problems that we've been canvassing and demonstrating and showing, we need to be able to understand that we can fix it. The human being can take care of any problem. When you understand what the problem is, the next phase is solutions. So what are the solutions to the political and social and psychological issues that attend us today. Well, first of all, what are the reasons for the state that we find ourselves in? In an American context, we understand that from a historical point of view, America is moving from infancy to adolescence. It is really experiencing its puberty and all of the different dysfunctions that attend that stage. We also understand that freedom and individuality are virtues which really must be earned. I understood this very much from an Irish context where freedom and democracy and so on is something that has to be struggled for. It's not just given to you by your oppressors and by your leaders. It's something that you're going to have to demand in order to receive. I mean, even the driving, to have a driving license and to drive a car is considered by the state to be a privilege and not your right. So we have to earn, and that's what we're seeing in the world today, is individuals having to find out what it means to be free. And as I said, we are now approaching the right time for all of this. The time of the past was not the time for solution think, but now the time has come. One of the other major setbacks and things we have to understand is that political action is erroneously been favored over legal. In our world today, it's often advanced to us that if you want to remedy a situation, well, you just get involved in politics. Well, as we've been seeing from this show and from also this series, that is simply not true. The whole political architecture has been created to purposely disempower you by allowing you to think that you have some power. Okay, yes, of course, on the street level, certain things get remedied, but who created those problems in the first place? Maybe perhaps as this millennium proceeds, we're going to understand that the political arena is actually a den of pigs. It's not something that ever fixes the major problems, but that of the two systems, the ones that we do have within our power, perhaps more legal know-how, legal empowerment is the key. I mean, legal power certainly used on us when the system comes after us. They're not too interested in what political party we belong to when they're kicking down our doors ready to drag us off, or when the IRS are coming in, or the state is coming in, or when the police are harassing us. They don't care if you're a Republican, Democrat, or Conservative, or Labor. It is a legal apparatus that is now being used against you. Well, maybe we need to realize, hey, we can use that on our side also, and put our energy into that rather than into waving placards and joining political parties. And ultimately, as we've just seen in the last phase, the need to spiritually heal and psychologically cleanse. This undergirds everything else. The whole idea of healing the self, healing one's own mind, must come before the attempt, even the simple attempt, to try and heal the wounds of society or humanity. This was also a message brought out in the Bible, that you need to be able to see clearly yourself before you attempt to free the blind. So we have reasons for the state that we're in. Now, the solutions to the problem of the new millennium fall basically into two categories. There's the internal and the external. There's the need to deal with the cleansing and healing of our own emotional bodies. This is number one, the most important thing. Deal with your own issues first. And one of the ways that can be done is to learn right meditation. And when I say right meditation, I'm not advocating any system whatsoever. In fact, that's the problem. Meditation cannot be learned by any system. Real meditation. I mean, it's amazing we've had to wait 2,000 years to even understand this after experiencing all the other isms and ologies and false paths out there. Perhaps we can now grasp this very, very simple point, that real meditation is your meditation, the one you create for yourself. Actually, your whole waking life, if lived correctly, is a form of meditation. Meditation is also not something you do. It is more something that you be, or that you are. Meditation is rooted in the being of life, not in the doing of life. And this is something that's going to take a lot of contemplation, because we are such a doing culture. Our whole conditioning is accomplishment and doing in the physical sense, and even in the mental, intellectual sense, and unfortunately, even in the spiritual sense. We're also doing in a idea of the spiritual world, and perhaps this is erroneous. And the second set of solutions, most people cannot comprehend how some so-called secret society could just move in and take over, as it were. We fail to realize that all post-Diluvian empires are based on the Atlantean pattern, and that the progeny of the warlocks of Atlantis have subjugated all peoples for thousands of years by autocratic and theocratic means. Their own symbols, like the cross and the crown and the double-headed eagle, reveal this very strategy. And we talked earlier about the fact that, yes, we have a dialectic here. We have a ordo ab chao philosophy imposed upon the human race in order to create the dissension. Moreover, the main reason for their success in domination over every class beneath them and in their engineered hierarchy lies in the fact that they have had virtually no opposition whatsoever. Their so-called opposition has been in many instances of their own creation, and the resistance of a few distinguished individuals down through time, however valiant and commendable, has almost no lasting effect. However, humankind's true opposition begins now. So, again, there's no need to be exasperated, as many people who get into researching these kinds of subject matter quickly become exasperated, thinking, well, wait a minute, first of all, could a secret society really come in and take over? Well, as we just pointed out, no, they don't just come in. It's not like the mafia just coming in one day and deciding to, take over. They have built our systems over their original template. But secondly, if you really view history, we understand that even though there have been many valiant attempts, there's been really no campaign of empowered opposition against any of these. And that's because man has been basically a farmer. Man has been kept in an incredible state of bondage, both mentally and physically. And that has lightened up to a certain extent. Yes, libraries are open to us. Yes, we have investigative journalists. Yes, we have cameras, and yes, we have pens. Yes, we have the internet, and so on. And this all constitutes a very important sea change. If we gain the right tools now, we will in fact constitute, in these last days, a true and authentic opposition. So just because it hasn't happened before and things have got into the state that they are now, is no reason to feel apathetic or depressed. The time of true, consistent human opposition has come at this point in time. We talked earlier about how in the next 10 years, all the secrets will be revealed to us. That is absolutely going to happen, and it is part of my work, but it's also part of the coming age of the human race, to understand what has been hidden from them so that they can constitute an important bastion against the authorities that have conspired to destroy us, defensively and on the attack. The two wings that we need to understand. But that can now be done in an educated and proactive and proper way. And again, as part of the solution matrix, what are the tools that we need? Well, I often use the analogy of chess. If I brought a chess master in here and say, hey, I want to learn this incredible game, but you are already a master, could you give me a few pointers? What is it that I need to know that I should never forget as I learn this subject? He will say 4 things. He will say that the first thing that is needed is an incredible sense of patience. In fact, if you really don't have patience, you probably shouldn't even begin the game. Then he will say that another important factor is a sense of timing. This is crucial. It's crucial in any game, even basketball or volleyball or football. The idea of rhythm and timing is also important. In chess specifically, he will say that there's a psychological dimension, which is knowledge of your opponent. And then he will also say that in chess, success is guaranteed if you're willing to make any and all sacrifices that may be needed of you. And then I think after hearing this, wow, could that not be one of the reasons why we're in the predicament that we are today? Because the individuals that have been controlling mankind for 11, 13,000 years, and certainly who helped bring about the Industrial Revolution and the rise of the great cities and the great governments and religions of the world, we understand that these people have an incredible sense of patience. They have agendas lasting decades. John Dee and his Pact with the Macrobes lets us know this, that they could literally wait aeons, hundreds and hundreds of years in order to just facilitate one phase of what they were doing. So there's an incredible sense of patience. And on the other side, we have none at all as human beings. No patience. They have an incredible sense of timing, and I mean that in every sense. As we saw, they already use sidereal timings, astrological timings. They're very conscious of cycles of which we don't even know that they exist. They have policies in government lasting 5, 10, 15, 20 years or and more. And we have very little sense of timing. We want everything to be done overnight. Psychological dimension, knowledge of the opponent, they have studied our every move. They know our libido, our sexual drives, our needs, our wants. Every aspect of our biology and psychology has been studied thoroughly by these individuals and by the people that they put in charge of that particular phase to study the creature that they have also created. What do we know about them? So little, which is again one of the problems that we need to face. We know next to nothing about the individuals that we are in conflict with, but they know a great deal about every nuance of our being and behavior. And then perhaps the clincher, willing to make all sacrifices. As we've seen in this program, for them it's just a matter of when and where. Whereas for us, perhaps because we have the moral sensibility, that one's a big stumbling block. So just looking at these 4 simple points can tell us a lot of the reasons of why we are in the predicament that we are today. Now, Ghislaine Langtot, in her book The Medical Mafia, really has something important to say about this whole solution scenario. And I want to look at the points that she brings up. There are also 4. And she uses the metaphor of David and Goliath, the famous old mythological story in the Bible of the young king, coming out against Goliath, this monstrous giant who's controlling and dominating his tribe. And Ghislaine Langtot says that David identified his enemy. That was the first thing. Identify your enemy. Then he found the weakness. He chose a simple weapon. And fourth, he was determined to win. So in programs like this, that's what we're doing is number 1. Identifying the enemy. Then we're trying to discover its weakness, which I think is partly, not entirely, to do with the legal powers that we have at our hands. Misused up until now, we're not fully aware of what that means, but I think if we grasp hold of legal empowerment, that is very much a tool that we should have in our armory. And a simple weapon. Again, not to get apathetic and think, oh my goodness, this is outside my control. We know from history that great changes are possible. And the smallest of men, I mean, the Lord of the Rings movie brings that out. The famous statement that even the smallest of people can affect history. And it absolutely is true. And of course, the determination to win. No program, no seminar, no lecture can instill that in somebody else. That's something, again, that's autonomous within the self. Buckminster Fuller also has a key point. The great architect and geometrist says, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Einstein said, we never solve a problem with the same intelligence that brought that problem or that error about. Some of the solutions involve collaboration, education, and sovereignty. Collaboration amongst the people who feel of like mind. Education, which is very, very important. Know thine enemy. And the idea of sovereignty, taking the law and strengthening yourself that way, constitutionally and socially. And education, Eustace Mullins says that no one is more cut off from true education than a student in an American university. So of course, we're not talking about education in the conventional sense. Yes, it would be wonderful if from the earliest days of school we were educated psychologically, we were empowered legally. Yes, we have people with vote clipboards harassing us in the street from morning to night, telling us, here, use your political rights, decade after decade. But nobody's standing there going, hey, we have legal empowerment classes, please come. Or here's a series of TV programs showing you even the most mediocre of your legal rights. No, there's a big void there. So unfortunately, we have to go in and do it ourselves in our own time and energy and educate ourselves. As Jordan Maxwell said about the normal system, the real meaning of graduation is nothing more than gradual indoctrination. William Colby, the late director of the CIA, he says, they are dangerous because there are so many of them. It is one thing to have a few nuts or dissidents. They can be dealt with, justly or otherwise, so that they do not pose a danger to the system. It is quite another situation when you have a true movement, millions of citizens believing something, particularly when the movement is made up of society's average successful citizens. That's right. The fear of the middle class, the fear of the fact that we now can go into libraries and research this fascinating subject of history and its alternative forms. This is a shock. It's a privilege that our forefathers didn't have. But we've gone to schools, we are educated, we can do the research, we can find out all that's been hidden from us. And this statement, and those who've done their homework understand, there's a tremendous fear from those behind the scenes of power. That's why they remain hidden. Often we're condemned for calling them the hidden elite, or that they're the secret government. Well, of course they're secret. They're secret because they have a lot to fear, a lot to lose if we ever should discover about their existence. Now, more specifically, we find that, in fact, there was no declaration of peace signed in America after the Civil War. You see, you have a thing called a declaration of war, but at the end of the war there must be a declaration of peace. There never was one. So we're always in a state of emergency, which gives the president the right to create executive orders, of which there have been many. In the other program in this series, Weapons of Mass Deception Behind the New World Order, we look at this concept of the president's rights, because legally, again, there has been no declaration of peace been signed. And therefore, technically, we're under a state of emergency in which the state has even more control than it would. Under Roosevelt, America already had signed Chapter 11. So economically, we went belly up back then. This is a fact that's not well known. We find that President Truman passed the National Security Act, which set the stage for the intelligence agencies to assume complete power. And we find that the president has the right to sign executive orders because of the demise of constitutional law in favor of the British Maritime Admiralty law system that rules supreme in the country. So again, legal, legal, legal. Are we under constitutional law? No, we find out that we're under British Admiralty law when you do your homework. And the executive order signing is also part of the whole aristocratic background of the presidents. James Traficante Jr., quoting from the Congressional Record on March 17, 1993, "It is an established fact that the U.S. federal government has been dissolved by the Emergency Banking Act of March 9, 1933, which was declared by President Roosevelt, being bankrupt and insolvent. The U.S. federal government exists in name only." Alan L. Benson, in his book The Dishonest Constitution, lets us know, where other men have skimmed the surface, Professor Beard, this is the man who wrote the book The Economic Interpretation of the Constitution of the United States, Professor Beard has gone through to the core. He stayed months in Washington to get to the core. In his search for ancient papers and documents in the Treasury Department, he went into vaults that were so filled with dust that it was necessary to excavate the papers with a vacuum cleaner. When he came back to the surface, he had damning evidence against a good many of the Patriot Fathers. He knew why they were so anxious not only for a new constitution, but for the particular kind of constitution that was afterward adopted. At the beginning of this program, we talked about that the flowery language, the cover of the language of the Constitution, and we, the people, sounded good, because it's not the easiest thing in the world to bring immigrants over here to push the wheel if they think they're going to have no more rights than they did in the horrible Europe they just left. So you have to create a very alluring situation, almost a utopian imagery to get people seduced to come over here. But there's no actual legal benefits at all. The people are neither free, protected, or secure. And we find that this Constitution that really all just benefits the rich and the powerful had to be covered over in sugar-coated language. James Madison says it in his Eliot Debates, Volume 5, where a majority are united by a common sentiment and have an opportunity, the rights of the minor party become insecure. In a Republican government, the majority, if united, have always an opportunity. The only remedy is to enlarge the sphere, that is, unite all the states under a federal government, and thereby divide the community into so great a number of interests and parties that in the first place, a majority will not likely, at the same moment, to have common interests separate from that of the whole, or of the minority. And in the second place, that in the case that they should have such an interest, they may not be so apt to unite in the pursuit of it. There's your basic agenda. Doesn't matter what you say after this point. If coherent action from the people is already snubbed by this divide and rule policy, it really doesn't matter whatever happens after that. You can talk all you want about democracy and freedom, but if there's an injustice that needs to be rectified but nobody can even get around the table, then that's the end of the game. And that is done legally. It is not a political action that makes that happen, it is a legal one. And therefore it is a legal one that can undo it. I referred earlier to the infernal trinity of the problem, confusion, solution. This is one of the secret society mechanisms that has been used to get us into the state that we're now in. Well, man can combat that. We have the power to create our own trinity, the supernal trinity of collaboration and education, and then sovereignty on the other side, which is involving the legal process, which will equal finally our freedom. This is the paradigm that comes out of the ancient world. Have we not got one of the most important central motifs in ancient mythology and the Arthurian kingdoms and traditions of the Gaelic people, the round table? What's implied there? Has anyone ever thought of this? That it's a round table in which no man is the head, that it's the coming together of all that make up kingship? Maybe we need to re-understand what that means and bring it about. A holarchy as opposed to a hierarchy. In the hierarchy, we have an up, we've got a down, we've got a middle, we have the uppers and the downers. And the uppers, those who are above us, this overclass, they are the ones who are conditioned to believe from birth that they are the whole. And they're no longer a part of the totality. And the downers, those are those conditioned to believe and feel that they're merely parts with no connection to the whole. This works beautifully. You're either a part of something or you're apart from it. It can be described as a part and apart. Well, wait a minute. The mass of humanity is going to say, I'm not manipulated, I'm free, right? Well, wrong. It's just a small case of processed lies from a prostituted media, subliminal manipulation and persuasion that's going on daily, the intellectual dumbing down. We got mercury poisoning, we got vaccinations and fluoride, we got antidepressants and hard drugs, we got modified foodstuffs, we got all manner of other suppressants coming out of coffee and sugar. We've got chemtrails in the air and airborne carcinogens. We got ELF waves on us and implants. We got manufactured allegiances. We've got artificial class divisions. We have a total lack of historical learning, and we have limited choice, or conversely over choice. We have a maritime law system coming out of the ancient world, and we have antiquated and corrupt political systems, and we have a totally corrupt judicial system. How are we free when over 50% of our hard-earned money goes in taxes to a private corporation, the IRS? When we can't even drive on the free ways without a license? When we pay for insurance in order to have the privilege of a driving license? When our children must be sent to government-approved schools or be confiscated from us? Have we ever questioned why that is? Why they can just kick down our doors and take away our children? Or why they even say that suicide is a felony? Hey, maybe it ties into that whole thing that if the country has gone into economic and fiscal default, meaning Chapter 11, all the individuals subsequently from that point are put onto the debt of the United States of America? And is that why it says on a dollar bill to pay all debts, public and private? Is there something we need to know about the indentured slavery of the American people? That they're all bonded onto the stock exchange in lieu of the debt of the United States of America? That they're merely human resources? Is that the reason why at the bottom of a birth certificate it says Department of Commerce? We got questions here about our legal status in the world and how that's being used against us. What happens when the nation's law enforcers are worse than the criminals? When one must buy alternative news information from the so-called underground in order to know what is even going on, because the mainstream media lies to cover their other lies. When schools are now handcuffing kids as 5 years of age and up, instead of educating them. When America has more political prisoners than any other nation, outsources its key jobs, gives billion in foreign aid, and has almost unlimited legal immigration. Again, note the legality question in all of this. Yes, we're free. As Goethe, right, Wolfgang Goethe wrote, none are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. And on a grassroots level, how does this dumbing down process happen? Well, In Haiti and so forth, the voodoo, the concept of the voodoo priest and the zombie, the voodoo priest would use a drug from the flowers of the genus Datura to hypnotize their victims. Victims were given this drug, and thereafter they had to be administered that drug every day, otherwise the zombie effect would wear off. Well, today we got exactly the same thing, only it's called TV. Media. Aldous Huxley says the older dictators fell because they never could supply their subjects with enough bread, enough circuses, enough miracles and mysteries. Under a scientific dictatorship, education will really work. Most men and women will grow up to love their servitude and never dream of revolution. There seems to be no good reason why a thoroughly scientific dictatorship should ever be overthrown. So that's right. As we lose more of our real rights and privileges, don't worry, we'll be given more entertainment. More sex, drugs, and rock and roll. More Dionysian pleasures to totally distract us. Vladimir Lenin, who should know all about it, one of the worst tyrants the world has ever had to endure, says, when a country is selected for attack, we must first set up before the youth of that land a mental barrage which will forever prohibit the possibility of that youth being molded into an armed force to oppose our invading armies. Well, wait a minute, I thought the communists were there to free mankind. Free the youth, give us all liberty and freedom for all, right? And Jefferson puts it this way, I really look with commiseration over the great body of my fellow citizens who, reading newspapers, live and die in the belief that they have known something of what has been passing in their times. So legally, there's a great deal that you can do, whether it's impeaching legally those ones who stand to take away our rights. We can handle that legally, perfectly legally. This is the only thing they really fear. They don't fear us if we go into the very circus that they have created for us, this constant tennis game of dialectics back and forth in the political pigsty. Sure, they've created that to slowly disempower us. Nothing gets done, nothing real. You may change the lower levels of the pyramid, but that's about it. But legally you have perhaps some more clout, and that is shown in the nature of the way that they actually fear anyone who's legally empowered. And we are in the age where there is literature, there is books, there is the internet. There are programs like this one. There is available information out there. If you take the time to research and look into just one of the aspects that we cover in this series of these programs, one can work on just one area here and come to great empowerment and knowledge. Just take hold of the legal issue, for instance, or just take hold of the technological aspect and run with it. Now, as part of the solution era, it is a fact that this present representative democratic model is severely antiquated, dating really from the 1700s. 240 million people represented by a mere 500 members of Congress, most of them Freemasons and secret society members and corrupt to the core. But now with electronic media, say the internet, and direct communication, there is a need for a paradigm shift in this regard. Well, that's right. If we're able to vote by way of websites and computers, could we not then have websites from the detractors so that we can really understand who it is that we're voting for? That might help. Because this ancient way is ludicrous. Used to be that the guy that you least liked in your village, you put on horseback and sent them off to Washington just to get rid of them. That was your representative. We're still using basically that system today. So we have to make use of the modern technology. And a good question to end with is what percentage of the colonists rose up against the legions of King George III during the American War of Independence? Here's the greatest tyrant of the 1700s, the greatest demagogue who had the legions and mercenaries at his beck and call, coming over here and imposing his dictatorship on the American colonies. Well, how many individuals rose up to throw him back into the Atlantic where he belonged? It was as little as 3% and as much as 6%. So somewhere between 3 and 6% of the population. So wait a minute, what was everybody else doing? Everybody was doing what they're doing now, cowering under the bed, shivering with fear. This detail, the statistic, makes us understand that we don't need to awaken everybody to make change. It's never ever happened like that, and it need not. So don't waste your energy. Power will be in your hands by a proper study and using the right tools. It doesn't require everybody. Everybody is never going to be focusing in one direction, nor will it take that. And then the other aspect we saw brought up by Galan Langtot, be determined to win. Benjamin Franklin says, if you make of yourself sheep, then the wolves will eat you. So you need determination, you need conviction. Frank Herbert, one of the great writers, the author of Dune, if you think of yourselves as helpless and ineffectual, it is certain that you will create a despotic government to be your master. The wise despot maintains among his subjects a popular sense that they are helpless and ineffectual. Thomas Jefferson, no free man shall ever be debarred the use of arms. The strongest reason for the people to retain the right to keep and bear arms is, at a last resort, to protect themselves against the tyranny in government. Abraham Lincoln, the United States of America can never be destroyed from forces outside its borders. If America falls, it will fall from within, brought down by apathy. When good people do nothing, anarchy reigns. And Martin Luther King, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. And again, the grassroots approach, as Amy Goodman found out and reported in her book, Exception to the Rulers, she says, people are hungry for unfiltered real-time coverage from real people's perspectives. So hungry that during the Battle of Seattle, there were more hits on the brand new website, indiemedia.org, than there was on CNN.com. So pick up a camera, go out to the streets, interview your friends, find out what's going on, take action, do it on a grassroots level. Don't wait for the 100% or the 70% or everyone else around you to get online and get behind you. Do it yourself. You are a power of one. Kathy O'Brien, a mind control victim and child sex slave, she puts it in the best way possible. They thought that they had left me with no place to run, but they were wrong because I am running right at them. And finally, from the great British, or great English, I should say, romantic poet Percy Shelley, rise up, he says, like lions after slumber, in invanquishable number, shake your chains to earth like dew, which in your sleep had fallen on you. Ye are many, and they are few.
The Maya shamans were remnants of the Lemurian race, whose intelligence allowed them to see into the future and astromantically calibrate when their own nemesis, the Atlanteans, would move towards their endgame. The presence and arrival of both photon belt and galactic center alignment was known to both contingents. Therefore, as I mentioned earlier, it was not a matter of hard prophecy, but of calculated guesswork and even simple common sense, derived from empirical cosmic evidence that prompted the enigmatic prediction concerning 2012 and the coming of the sixth world. If we choose to prepare a dish with certain ingredients, we can be fairly sure in advance what the cooking time and even what the final taste will be. The wild speculations of those idealists within the New Age cabals have merely muddied the waters of clarity and confounded the facts. As I have sought to reveal, history has been a dish prepared with a fixed set of ingredients by some master chefs. It has been formed according to a pre-drawn set of blueprints which both sides were once privy to. The Atlanteans knew that their Lemurian enemies would attempt to make the human race, and Adamic man, aware of what was awaiting them. To this end, they have stuck resolutely to their heinous plan to seek out and obliterate those civilizations created by the descendants of the Lemurians. As history reveals, they have been very successful in their genocidal enterprise. Official historians call their invasions conquests, and though we lament the ruthless manner in which they were carried out, the actual reasons for this kind of zeal have not been fully exposed. We think it was merely an imperialistic quest for land and gold. We think these crimes were committed merely by over-emphatic minions of royal European despots, motivated by some kind of misguided religious fervor. This customized gloss-over serves the history textbooks, read by many millions, but it is not the truth. As the actual histories of Russia, Africa, Ireland, and even America have never been made public, neither has that of the world itself. The actual undoctored history of this planet has been a carefully coveted and guarded secret. In some respects, it might be thought of as the secret of secrets. We are reaching a time in which we will not be able to proceed in our macrocosmic tyranny without cleaning the inner house and graduating psychologically. We are seriously arrested in regards to our spiritual development, and we are now going to be asked personally and collectively to sit in after class, so to speak, to catch up. If we are not willing to do this, we are going to find our privileges being removed by the higher powers of justice and balance which are operating around us. When our safety nets are removed, we find that we become very conscious of every step we then take across the long tightrope of life. The time of revealing is no joke, and most human beings are not possessed of inherent skills to deal with the changes that it brings. In short, the photon belt can be seen figuratively as the universal intelligence slowly turning up the light. This has already been occurring, but so gradually that we're not consciously aware of it. We are conscious of the increased darkness caused by the intensification of Akashic light. We are conscious of the psychic and somatic unrest in ourselves and in those around us. We are conscious of the all-pervading moral atrophy and the instability and corruption of political leviathans. We may not see or feel the light, but we do see and feel the spirit of narcissism in evidence all around us. Actually, it is time to be okay with these circumstances, for they're going to continue. They're meant to continue, and there is nothing much to be done about it. The mansion, which was once beauteous and magnificent, but which has long been abused and neglected, and which cannot be restored, must be condemned and leveled. So it is with the world system and status quo. As we progress through the following years, we are not going to be able to be experiencing restoration, but regeneration, not catharsis, but catabolism, not Shakti, but Shiva. We're going to be experiencing Mars and Pluto, not Jupiter and Venus. The survivors are those who can adjust their consciousnesses and mentality to the inviolate movement of nature and synchronize their psyches with the universal meta-theme. We have moved so far from our natural intelligence, moved so far into the labyrinths of ignorance, and have become so comfortable in a world of wall-to-wall lies and fakery that our living, intelligent planet is forced to do something about it. Though we have become accustomed to it, we are somatically, psychically, and socially so polluted that our souls can rarely glimpse the heavens, so to speak. We have so repressed and incarcerated our own true voices and blinded our soul senses that we're doomed to having the fates conspire to augur in cataclysmic external and internal events in order to undermine the rotten edifice we stand worshipping and bring it crashing down around us. As this photonic light gradually intensifies, most people's consciousnesses are going to rebel, as we all do when a bright light is shined in our face. We turn away and cover our eyes. We may even strike out at those holding the light towards us. Those few who can face this light and who are prepared for it will be guided, given their healing, and able to live their dreams. But these few will have to be deeply able to understand what is happening to those around them in order to be defended against the worst effects of this irregular but radical change. As I predict in my book, Atlantis, Alien Visitation and Genetic Manipulation, whether it be by photonic action or major constellational alignments, we are all going to soon know the truth about our actual origins and existence. The masks are coming down, both on the personal and global levels. Our challenge will be to find the strength to accept what happens and to align ourselves with the catabolic forces which enter to restore and rejuvenate our planet and our being. We must reorient the energies that we channel towards rectifying political and social atrophication towards the inner psychological dimension, for it is our own inner house which needs renovation. We are each primarily responsible for what occurs in the space within, from the center of our being to our physical skin. It is this organic temple which needs cleansing, and not so much the outer environment. And, like our ancestors, we are to adjust our consciousnesses so that we are concerned with the overall welfare of the planet and not merely our own material needs. Man has a lot to make up for and great abuses to take responsibility for. His recompense needs to be deep, sincere, and active. The fact is that you are here on this planet as a guest. Your purpose is to leave the planet in a better condition than when you found it. Now, those who do not understand this purpose are condemned to act in a manner which achieves the opposite result. However, no welcome guest destroys his host's property or leaves things in a mess. None of us would tolerate this kind of behavior from anyone in our lives. So please understand that we are not going to be permitted to be delinquent guests much longer by our living host, the Earth. The Maya calendar's date of December 21st, 1999 was the beginning of the time of reckoning. It signaled a time when the living universal presence would begin calling out our names to check out how many of her children are awake and attentive. The sensitive ones who are hearing her have little to worry about. Alternatively, those who refuse to awake and who remain narcissistic, careless, and abusive may have everything to worry about.